at the 5x5 LP challenge, which a few of you seem to like, where I just reach behind me and pull out a record and see if I know anything about the record. I have about 2,000 records. Many people, Steve Guttenberg probably has about 6,000 records. I don't really have that many records. I don't have that much space for records, and I've run out of space behind me, so they're over here and they're over there and they're over there. Anyway, let's go over here. Pull out one from behind me here. I think I'm in the impulse rack. Sorry, doesn't want to cooperate. Well, it's John Coltrane's Crescent, one of his great impulse records before heading off into interstellar regions. Classic quartet, McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, I think, the great Elvin Jones, and this is the last era of ABC impulse pressings that are still worth hearing. If you can see it there, the ABC impulse, and they've changed the spelling or the lettering of impulse to 70s cool or something, I don't know. But it's funny because the ABC looks exactly as it did in the 70s, and I imagine this is a 70s pressing. And if you look at London Jazz Collector, I believe he says this is the tail end of when they're any good. And they finding any version of these Coltrane impulse records is hard because they weren't reissued heavily. This week I went by this record store in the East Village called Stranded. It used to be Good Records, and I was talking to the guys there, and apparently that is the storefront for Superior Viaduct, which does really great reissues, and they are reissuing, come this Friday, 5 Alice Coltrane records on impulse. That's a really big deal. And they had a couple Alice Coltrane reissues there that I have, Monastic Trio, and I forgot the other one, but that's a big deal. And they're cut from files. The fellow told me he didn't know who cut the files or where they're pressed rather, even though I believe I've read somewhere that it's not RTI. But anyway, that's that record, and that's going to be a great thing to see those Alice Coltrane reissues this weekend. This is an interesting record. Carmen McRae, kind of a great forgotten jazz singer. I mean, she's really forgotten, and she's one of the great jazz singers. I often joke that, to me, Diana Krall sounds like a drunken Carmen McRae with marbles in her mouth. But McRae had kind of a low-pitched voice, I guess a tenor for females. And here she's singing Alfie, the great song, the great theme song to the album. And if you don't have the soundtrack, Sonny Rollins' soundtrack of Alfie, also on Impulse, you should buy that now. That's one of the great Impulse records, and I think one of the top 5 Sonny Rollins records. That's a tremendous record if you don't have it, the soundtrack to Alfie. But as many jazz singers did back then, they would sing the hit singles of the time, or the hit songs of the time in their own way, as many artists did back then. But this is on Mainstream, which was a small New York label that did a bunch of great recordings. I think also mostly in the late 60s and the 70s. And they're easy to find. Well, they're actually hard to find. They've been reissued, but original Mainstream recordings are hard to find. There's quite a few with Shelly Manne, Roy Haynes, Charles McPherson. But I haven't listened to this record a lot, but I love Carmen McRae. Great singer. She was a lesbian, but I don't think it wasn't public until she died. And just great character, great wit, very sophisticated female vocalist. She did a lot of great records. To me, Carmen McRae, Betty Carter, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Beverly Kinney, Helen Merrill, who I'm playing in the background, constitute the top 5 or 10 female jazz singers in my book. People like Anita O'Day, I don't know much about her, actually, to tell the truth. So let's pull out, we've done 2 there that I know something about. Oh, and here's what label is this? The Shelly Manne record. Is this Mainstream? Oh, this is a Mainstream record with Shelly Manne. And it's a white label promo. As you can see there. This is an interesting Shelly Manne record. Because he's kind of playing his version of funk and fusion. Shelly Manne, Mankind, and most of the mainstream records were gatefold like this. Something just fell out. Oh, the sleeve just fell out. But the band here, Shelly Manne, John Morell guitar, Mike Wofford on piano, Gary Barone on trumpet, Jerry Castleman on bass. So I guess it's an East Coast record. Where was it recorded? 1972 Mainstream Records. But it's a New York label, which is bizarre. Do they list the studio on here? No, they don't. But you gotta love that shirt, right? It's probably polyester and he's sweating his ass off. But this is kind of a fusion-y record, but everything Shelly Manne did was great. I don't think he made a bad record. He just had he was such a wide open musician to all different genres of jazz, subgenres, and playing styles. He could play anything. He's on millions of soundtracks. You probably don't know it's him. But this is a cool record. I've not heard of most of these players. Brian Moffat on percussion. Pretty cool, right? And I didn't pay much for this mainstream record. It's mainstream $3.75. So there's three. Couple more out here. Oh, this is one I haven't listened to at all. Blues Suite, Eka Salim. Dan, the jazz shepherd, he could probably tell you a lot more about this than I can. But because of him, really, when I see a Savoy record, I just buy it. They're all Rudy Van Gelder. It's not the most forward-thinking jazz, but it's all very solid, very swinging, great players. And this looks fantastic, right? Nat Adderley, Buster Cooper, Phil Woods, Selden Powell, Sahib Shihab, Eddie Costa, George DeVivier, Wilbur Hogan. A great shot of which I take to be New York or maybe Chicago. I think I bought this at Human Head a little while ago. There's no date on it. But I paid $15 for this. Probably a first pressing. Savoy Records didn't go into many represses as far as I know. That's why when you see one, you just sort of buy it. But, you know, very mainstream, down the middle, swinging jazz, swinging performances. They're all Rudy Van Gelder engineering, so they're just great. That's actually kind of a beautiful cover, I think. I don't know much about Eka Salim. I have one other record by him. These are really interesting. Well, Chicory Leprechaun, that's not when I pulled that. Peter Herbolzheimer, Rhythm Combination and Brass. He is a German saxophonist, I believe, or trombonist rather, and these are some kick-ass 70s records. He did 5 or 6 records, Peter Herbolzheimer, and they were on MPS. This one's on Polydor, and they're just the epitome of that 70s Henry Mancini, Dave Grusin, really funky, Streets of San Francisco, big ensemble brass sections that are really extremely well played, smart arrangements. This is actually a reissue, I believe. RC and B. This might be a British record, but you gotta love the reflection, right? But there's the sticker where it was bought. Finley. I think this is a Polydor import. Yes, it is. But these are Timeline. He does Spain. Finally, we picked up a Chick Corea record. He covers Spain. A Day in the Life. The Mixolydian Highlander. Madcap on Tyrese. The Letter from RK. This is 1977. Recorded at Deutsche Grammophon Studios, Hamburg. If you see these records, any of these Peter Herbolzheimer records, it's weird. A couple of years ago, one was a record store day release, and it kind of sucked. But it was just not good. But he made a number of great records in the 70s. I'm sure people out there can tell me more about him than I know. But that's 5x5 Jazz LPs. Thanks for checking in. I really appreciate you all watching these videos. I hope you get something out of it. It's fun for me just to pull records out and see what there is. It makes me realize why I bought some of these records. Please join our group, Jazz Vinyl Lovers, on Facebook. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know if you have opinions or comments or things you'd like me to do with the limited amount